Привіт. Рома, тебе не чути.
Да, вже тепер чути.
Я почала зразу своїм звуком розбиратися, думаю, можливо, щось в мене не те. Це бачу, ти
Ні, в тебе все правильно. Так. Окей. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are from. We are going to start our 8th bi-weekly update on Ukraine. And today we are going to talk about except in addition to the usual points, which is war, the grain export problems, the grain production season, agricultural season problems, and of course, World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine. We will also listen to our expert, Vitaly Hrishchenko. He is part of our team, TravelEye team, and he is going to provide his outlook at the season from the field standpoint of view, so to say. And of course, our project coordinator, Denis Serhienko, will finish today's meeting with the presentation on production of sunflower, on the technologies of sunflower production in Ukraine. So I'm going to start the screen and we will proceed with the presentation. Hopefully you can see it. If not, full screen. If not, let me know. Just a second, it's starting. Can you see it full screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So today we have the, like I said, 8th bi-weekly connection, and unfortunately the war is still going on. Here is the situation. Okay. Here is the situation in the war in the east. This is the most active part, the most active territory where the war is going on is the eastern part, Donbas region. So Ukrainian forces needed to retreat from Lysychansk in order to save the people's life. Unlike the military or the forces, Russian forces, our military, they care about the lives of their soldiers, and they didn't want to be surrounded, so they needed to retreat, and they did it very well, very nicely. For you to understand, when they were leaving, there were a few locations where there were soldiers left just to do the answering artillery shellings. So what does it mean? In order to pretend that the army is still there, so that the Russians, they think that they are about to encircle all Ukrainian army. There were a couple of Ukrainian soldiers sitting there and firing back. When everybody, including the civilians who were willing to leave, have left the city, these couple of divisions, they left too, and unfortunately the city was taken by Russians. However, we hardly had any losses or had none. This information, by the way, about the losses of Ukrainian army, it was just yesterday that one of our officials came up with the explanation why we are not seeing the losses of Ukrainian army. The reason is that the enemy is seeing that information too. And if they find out that this amount of Ukrainian soldiers deceased and this amount of Ukrainian soldiers were injured, they will understand the total potential of Ukrainian army. So this is the war secret, so to say. Therefore, after the Lysychansk city was taken, almost all the area of Luhansk region was taken. However, there is still a small piece of it under control of Ukrainian forces. A good success was the Snake Island, which is located in the Black Sea, very close to Romania. Ukrainians have forced Russian troops to leave this island, and they have settled Ukrainian flag there. No military is there. However, the territory has freed up, and I will tell you more a little bit later how it affected the situation in the seas with our export. So Donbas region, this is a more detailed map, and you can see that they have moved a little bit forward in this area. The next for them, they say, is Slovyansk and Izum. So the Institute of War, as well as Ukrainian intelligence, they are considering that the most active attacks will be coming towards these two cities from Russian forces. However, so far we are having most active missiles. And this is what you are seeing on the pictures. Recently, we had, I'm sorry, I will just in just a second, I need to turn off the sound of someone. I'm not sure who that is, but the microphone, please turn off the microphones. Okay, now it's done. So Russians are very severely bombing and shelling our cities that they can reach with artillery. However, the artillery is secondary. After Ukraine has got their HIMARS systems, we have been successful in destroying their storages of ammunition. So the artillery shots and shellings have decreased significantly. However, they're using the missiles, and the recent couple of days have been very dramatic and very active from the Russian terroristic standpoint of view. They have destroyed a number of civilian objects with a lot of losses. Here you can see a few of the examples of their attacks to the civilian objects just recently. Chasiv Yar, this is the Donetsk Oblast. As you know, Donbas consists of two oblasts, two administrative regions, which is Luhansk and Donetsk. So Luhansk is almost all fully occupied, but Donetsk is less than half occupied. Therefore, they're having moved a little bit forward. They have been proceeding with shelling the civilian blocks. Of course, Mykolaiv. Mykolaiv, you know that it is a very big city in the central Ukraine, central Ukraine, and it holds the second biggest port in Ukraine, which is located on the Dnieper River. They are unfortunately too close to the city, and they have been shelling and applying missiles to this city for weeks already, almost every day. You will see the results in a couple of slides right now. So July 14, 9 rockets. Back here, there were 28 rockets, July 12th. July 14, there was a very terrible tragedy. Of course, all of those attacks, they result in tragedies. We are not diminishing any of the losses, but this one was very aggressive and very terroristic. There is no other word, or medieval, because they knew that their rockets will hit the civilian objects. They knew because those rockets have the radius of distraction from the route within a couple of meters. So this is a couple of dozens of feet, that's all maximum. And they hit the central theater, the House of Officers. This is the theater, and the building hosted also a medical institution. All the people in that institution, in that clinics died. A lot of people were just burned to death in the cars parked around this object, and we saw very terrible pictures of body parts all around the central square of Vinnytsia city. For you to understand, Vinnytsia does not have any military objects. So this is the second reason, second proof that they are doing it deliberately to civilian cities. Furthermore, I have read on the comments of one of their officials or politicians, puppets, Putin's puppets, because this is the only way we can call them, that the missiles were launching towards the place where Nazis had their meeting. Ukrainian Nazis had their meeting, and it has hit the place with civilians. But, and here I quote, "This is the way to go. There should be a lot of civilian deaths for Zelensky regime to surrender." This is what they are targeting it, that they want to push Ukraine to surrender, but they are reaching the contrary. So as the result of this attack towards Vinnytsia, 23 people died, including 3 children. It is 350 children total that died from this war. Why? Today was another attack towards, by the way, the situation that happened in Vinnytsia coincided in time with the
This is called.
I'm sorry, can you turn
All
off
right.
the microphone?
It's an
Yes, thank you. In Gaga, the court that was beginning in Gaga to look through and investigate the terroristic acts of Russian Federation against humanity. So this court or this investigation has started yesterday at the same time when Vinnytsia attack was going on. Also, at the same time, in Turkey, there was a meeting about the corridor to allow Ukrainian grain to leave the country. And preliminary, they have agreed to a plan which so far has not been approved by Putin. So these two important meetings happening resulted in attack to Vinnytsia. But that's not the only thing. Here you can see today's tragedy. It's thanks God it didn't kill anyone so far, at least what we know so far, because it was just today. 10 rockets again hit Mykolaiv, and they were targeting the educational institutions. As a result, we have at least, but this is what is known right now, 1.9 thousand educational institutions damaged in Ukraine, 215 completely destroyed. As we know, when the war started, the first strikes were towards the military airports. The second ones were towards the hospitals. The third raid was towards the fuel stations, then infrastructural objects. Of course, now we can see a lot of civilian objects and educational. Unfortunately, this doesn't look like bad missiles or bad management of the strikes. This looks like a deliberate program of destroying the country. First of all, hospitals. They did it deliberately because they knew that those who are injured will need medical care. And if there are no hospitals, there will be no medical care, and soldiers will not be able to recover. More deaths will be occurring, and they will have better chances to succeed in their war. This is what they did in Syria, by the way. Then the civilian objects, I just mentioned what they are thinking. They think that by hitting civilian objects and by the death tolls among civilians, they will push our government to surrender. And of course, the educational genocide. By the way, it is not the only time in history when they have been targeting educational institutions and people who are scientists and intelligence, as they say. In the history, Russia or Soviet Union have done a number of massive shootings of the people, or death tolls, so to say, to the people who were intelligent enough to say no to Russian occupation in the past. That was before the Soviet Union and during the Soviet Union. Therefore, a lot of Ukrainian writers, poets, media people, politicians, cultural representatives were just shot to death in the history. Now they are doing the same. They are destroying the educational institutions for the people to not to be able to get their diplomas or to proceed their education. But they're forgetting that Ukrainian new generation speaks very good English, and they can go and get education abroad and then return to Ukraine after the victory. But that's in the future. Right now, let's proceed. So as I mentioned, the HIMARS that we received were used very effectively against the warehouses of the ammunition and against their barracks and the decision-making military points in the occupied territory of Ukraine. I'm stressing here that we have never, our army has never hit civilian objects on purpose and has never hit the territory outside of the borders of 1991 of Ukraine. So at nighttime, mainly, HIMARS are shelling and very successfully hitting the targets of those storages of ammunition and destroying the storages that have been only unloading for a couple of days. So for you to understand, when the Russians occupy the land, they use railroads to bring ammunition and new military equipment there, because they are using thousands of items of ammunitions per day. Therefore, they need cars, dozens of cars of this ammunition, and they are, of course, creating storages. So after HIMARS, and we know that there are 8 of units like that, so analogs of HIMARS and HIMARS both. So they, after they hunt, so to say, hunted, you can see the difference just within a couple of days, 4 days. These are the hot points of the artillery strikes, and of course the fires caused by it. Within 4 days, they have significantly decreased, and the process is still going on. These are the HIMARS. At least 50 targets were hit by HIMARS. Of course, a couple of them were within one locations. Therefore, officially, what we know is that 20 Russian depots or warehouses of the ammunition were destroyed over the last week or so. This is the Ukrainian success, and there are a lot of talks about the military equipment being inadequately used in Ukraine or something like that. That is not true. Ukrainian soldiers, first of all, they understand what they are fighting for. Therefore, they cherish every missile, they cherish every person in the army. Secondly, they do not take risk if it is not needed. So by saying that, they move the items, the HIMARS, all the time. There was, it seems to me, BBC or some other reputable news media. They have worked with one of those HIMARS for one day, and they have made the video of how it is hidden and how it is moving around and how it is taking orders. So they never stay in the same location for more than 1 day. And of course, after each shellings, they leave. Therefore, the Western world does not need to worry that this weapon might be taken by Russians easily. They are untrackable so far, and let's hope that's the way how it's going to be. On the other side, Russians have used most of their precise artillery, and they're using the bombs that even explode right after the launch, in the point of launch. That was one of the cases this night. One of the 4 missiles that were launched toward Mykolaiv at one time exploded just at the launch time. We are hoping that this will help us reach the victory quicker. These are the numbers of Russian army losses. As I always have been telling, the numbers are less than those coming from United Nations, for the reason that these numbers does not require the body to be identified before it is counted. It is what it is taken from the observations of Ukrainian soldiers. So it is a rough estimation. It can be more, it can be less. Now we are moving towards the agricultural season. As you know, the planting season was the most difficult for Ukrainian farmers this year. However, they didn't give up as well as Ukrainian soldiers. Therefore, I always keep telling that Ukrainian agricultural fields have become the second battlefields in this war. So you can see the numbers. I will just remind you. This is the spring wheat, spring barley, spring canola, oats, peas, corn. Here we have the numbers in thousands of hectares for the year 2021. Below we have numbers in thousands of hectares for the year 2022. This is buckwheat over here, the second line. This is millet. This is sugar beet, sunflower, soybeans, and potatoes. As a result, this is what was planted in 2021, 16 million, almost 17 million hectares. So 916 thousands of hectares. Therefore, this is almost 17 million. In 2022, it was a little over 13 million. This is the decrease, in addition to the lower projected yields. Here is the breakdown on the crops of the which were planted. Spring wheat. This is the only crop that has increased in numbers of acres, for the reason that spring wheat is not popular in Ukraine. Majority, like 95% of wheat produced in Ukraine, is winter wheat, mainly soft white winter wheat. But this year, when they understood that corn is not going to be a wise crop for Ukrainian farmers to plant, for the reason that it takes a lot of inputs, it takes a lot of work in the field, and it takes a lot of volume in order to harvest it, farmers have shifted to more of the higher value crops, which is wheat, some oil crops, and of course soybeans. Therefore, the acres under spring wheat have increased. Soybeans, you can see, although the total acreage of the fields that could be planted this spring decreased, soybean remained pretty much the same. Corn has decreased by 1 million hectares, almost 1 million hectares. That's a huge decrease, and you will see how it influences the projected yields of corn in the future. So crop forecast in millions of metric tons. Blue is year 2021. Yellow, it is the projected crop yields as of the end of May. And this is as of the 5th of July, the last green column. So you can see how dramatically the total harvested volume of corn, projected to be harvested volume of corn, has decreased. Sunflower too, soybeans a little bit, but if we take in general, so it's not that little bit, it's 1/3. Wheat, very much, unfortunately, due to a lot of losses of the winter crops fields, because although the crops have overwintered well due to the weather conditions, they have, not survived the attack, the war. For you to understand, about 50% of the winter crops in only Kharkiv Oblast are not going to be harvested. 50%, not 50 of winter crops. So barley and rapeseed, which is canola. This is the production and export. So let's pay attention to the first two colors: grain production in millions of tons and grain export. So you see this what has been before. Now we take this year, 22-23, and for you to understand, the marketing year has already started. At some points it starts from the 1st of June, at some point it's 1st of July. But anyway, it doesn't matter here that much. So what is expected? Production of the tons of the crops forecast, which was before war, was at 100. Then the grain production forecast when the war started, it dropped almost half. The export forecast before the war was at this point 61.45, but when the war started, the understanding came that the export will be lower. This is the wheat production. You know that Ukraine produces about 10% of the total world production of wheat. And this is very significant, especially for those countries that are considered to be developing countries, not the EU, I mean. And you see that we've been gradually increasing the amounts of wheat produced. However, the wheat this year, this we have two columns here, and pay attention what they mean. The first column, this is the unoccupied territory producing wheat, forecast for wheat produced in the unoccupied territory. This is the total production, including the occupied territory, but no one knows for sure how it will end, even for this part. Of course, this part is the least projectable. They just, in this very investigation they were using, they couldn't visit the fields themselves, how they used it before. They traveled through the most significant points and took the measurements in order to do the predictions. This year, they were communicating mainly with the officials in the area. And you can see, so by they, I mean Agritel Argus. They have this tour traveling throughout the most significant locations in the agricultural parts of Ukraine and collect information, and then they project the potential productions just like USDA does. And as you can see here, this is the upper scale. The difference is only in one number, but this number is important because we are talking here about in two numbers. I mean in the in three in the first column. The first upper table is of the unoccupied territories. The second is including the occupied territories. You can see that there is a slight difference in millions of tons total. There is lesser yield, and of course the area is bigger. As a result, taking into consideration the occupied and unoccupied territories of Ukraine, we have the projection on in the yields approaching USDA prognosis. Okay, good, got it. So here we have I've been hearing, this is my personal observation, not something that officials said. I have been hearing that USDA is not very precise in the projections. However, what this chart does, it is proving that so far they are quite right about Ukraine. We'll see how the war changes this map. So burning fields. This is one of another actions that Russia is taking towards destroying of Ukrainian most important industry, which is agriculture. Let me remind you, 0% of the export income comes from the agricultural export in Ukraine. So the map is a little bit older. However, the numbers are new. About 22%, take it away. Yeah, 22% of all agricultural land is occupied by Russians. The front line, and this is important, stretches for 1,000 kilometers. It was the official statement yesterday by our officials from the military ministry, Zaluzhny, Mr. Zaluzhny. He said that the front line is 1,000 kilometers. What they're doing in the front lines, where there are a lot of fields ready to be harvested, especially in the south, but also as the season proceeds more to the north, they are launching their artillery with torch missiles, with the not explosions purpose, but firing purpose. And they are burning the fields as the result. They have started to do it when the crops got dry enough, right about to be harvested. So what do we have? Here are unfortunately, a lot of videos are coming in, even combines burning down in the fields, trying to harvest before the fire takes over the acreage. These are the numbers, just numbers of a couple of locations which were officially registered. And you see that Ukrainian military, they are not fighting fires with Russians, but they are also fighting fires in the actual fields. Again, Ukrainian agricultural fields are the second battlefields in this war. As a result, we know that there have been at least 1/3 of the million of hectares burned down crops. 1/3 of the million. Those are the winter crops, mainly wheat and small grains. Totally, there were 3,000 fires recorded. And of course, they have covered not only the fields, but the forests too. Therefore, we are talking about 1.5 million hectares. Out of those, at least 270,000 hectares are the forests. Agricultural lands and other lands like wild, how do we call them? Wilderness, lands of wilderness, they are also burning. Not the fields, not the agricultural fields, not the forest, but it covers, of course, and villages too. So fires are one of the problems these days. This is done deliberately for one of the reasons, to decrease the production in Ukraine. So they are playing the two-sided game. On one side, they are claiming officially that they do not oppose Ukraine exporting their commodities. They participate in Turkey about creating the corridors of export. But on the other side, once we are approaching the decision in opening the ports, they get more active in destruction of Ukrainian agriculture. Last time it was Mykolaiv port with oil storage, a lot of elevators destroyed, and now those are the fields. So in the meantime, they are claiming that they're expecting the highest yields of wheat and small grains, winter small grains this year. So to say, building the backup or the ground for being able to export a lot of grain, which is stolen from Ukraine, but they will act as if it was grown in their fields. These burnt fields, they are, of course, and they can, of course, be replanted next season, but you gentlemen and ladies, everyone who is involved in agricultural production knows that this is the destruction of their biological activity in the soil, a very severe destruction. It is burning their organic matter, and at times it may take over decade to build up their production levels on these soils that were before burning. Of course, there are a lot of damages done by the missiles, because when they explode in the fields, they create these potholes, and these potholes will take even more than decades to be leveled up. They have a lot of pollution materials after the explosion, which enter the waters, the soil levels underneath the upper ones. Also, one of such explosions, potholes, will require hundreds of trucks of soil to build it up, to level it up. Demining. The problem with demining is a very severe problem, and the total acreage is at least the size of New Zealand to be checked for mines. For you to understand, Ukraine is, as well as our allies, we are working very hardly on inventing the options to demine quickly and effectively the land, because the price for demining is 1 square meter is about $3. You can imagine what are the numbers to demine. So one average size field would cost $50,000, 50, to get checked for the mines. And we have the total acreage 270 square kilometers of land that must be checked. By the way, just recently I saw the news that they, based on the precision farming and autonomous technology, have created a system of demining where the tractor, non-man operated tractor, was going with the arms with the very sensitive detectors for the mines through the field. It had also those in front of it, and the drone is flying over it. So I'm not sure, it is just a prototype, it is Ukrainian model, but what they do, they identify the metal objects, they explore it and provide the GPS coordinates for the manned demining specialists to come over and take care of this item. So another problem from the southern, especially occupied areas, Russians are stealing grain. There has been a lot of official statements, and there have been a lot of media investigations about that, even BBC. At this moment, more than 500, that's the minimum, that's the very minimum, which is officially proven, of 500,000, so 500,000 metric tons of grain have been stolen by Russians from the southern regions. And I would like to remind you that they have occupied majority of the ports, and ports usually have the most enormous in their volume size storages of the grains. So now they're controlling it and trying to sell it to Syria and to some other countries. So the total grain that has been stolen is worth grain and oil, because Ukraine processes a lot of sunflower oil, and it also comes into calculation over $600 million. The losses. There have been attempts of Kyiv School of Economics to calculate the losses of the war. At the beginning of the war, I came up on the numbers that would go as high as $199 billion in war damages to agriculture and industries that support agriculture total. That number was very, very general, and as they claimed, it can reach 199 for the reason that there is a lot of land occupied, and we don't know what's happening there. So the Kyiv School of Economics has done their own calculation as June of 13. It's a bit maybe older, but still it provides you with more or less accurate data. So the blockade of ports, it results in the lowering of the prices of the commodities. So the farmers are losing that in the value of their crops, and it results in almost $12 billion. In the couple of slides later, I will show you all the current prices in Ukraine and in the world for the most important crops. Production decline, of course, because of the war, the yields have lowered. This is another $10 billion of losses. Unharvested crops, no explanation is needed, 1.4 billion. Lands that have been destroyed or that are not able to be planted, $2 billion. And of course, machinery, this is probably the smallest loss so far, because of course, the natural and the land has always been the most valuable items. Anyway, so the elevators damages. What they have been running the rule. I mean, Russians, they have been following this pattern. We seize it within a couple of days. If we cannot seize it, we destroy it. This works with the villages, very unfortunately with the cities too, and with the objects like the elevators. So it is estimated that the total capacity of 4 million tons was elevators was destroyed. Let me remind you, the total capacity of Ukrainian storages was before the war 57 million metric tons. 4 of it has officially been lost due to the destructions and damages by the missiles and artillery. Of course, a majority of those are in the occupied territories. Now, another sector that has hardly been mentioned in some media, which is the animal sector. Of course, the farms, the dairy farms, the swine farms, poultry farms, sheep farms, they have very direct dependence on the fields and the crops production. And of course, the security from the missiles and the artillery is not a secondary thing for them. Therefore, at least 800 dairy farms were affected by the war. Let me give you a little bit of background. Ukraine has not been very successful in supplying enough milk to its market. We've been building up the population of cows for a number of years before the war, and we're just approaching to the amount necessary to feed Ukrainians to satisfy the processing facilities. We have enough for Ukrainians, but we have a lot of processing facilities, and the majority of the milk that is coming actually from the family farms rather than from the agricultural businesses. Therefore, this intention was to be made. The intention before the war was to shift more to the controlled animal farms with the stable quality of milk, which is required by the processing facilities. However, up to 60% of milk was coming from the family farms. You can see how important they were. But still, we are talking here about the business farms, and the damage was done to about 800 dairy farms. And these are the number of heads that of animals that were killed during this war. Total losses is $136 million. We are risking to lose the third of the dairy herd in Ukraine. About 50,000 of cows are equaling $80 million are killed. So here we have mentioned the other animals, and cows, they are separate. We've been today contacted by one of the initiatives to build up and to help develop their family farms dairy production. Next time in 2 weeks, I will inform you on the further development of this program, because it is something that coincides with our World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine, as well as it helps the Ukrainian family farms survive and people get food. This is the dairy map of Ukraine. So for you to understand, the occupied territory supplies 42% of milk for processing. And we are seeing the reduction of the milk production in the areas that are in active war zone by half. Now we are moving to the export, grain export, a very hot topic as of these days. So let me provide you some of the numbers. So the marketing year for some companies, it starts from the 1st of June, for the others from the 1st of July. However, if this new marketing year that has just opened is compared to the previous one, it has reduced by 30%. This is taken into consideration that all the ports, sea ports, are closed, that a lot of attempts were made and efforts to improve and increase the export capacities of the railway, of the trucks, and of the Danube River ports. We are still far behind in the amounts to be exported. And you can see the numbers. Wheat is 71,000 tons compared to the previous year, the same time span, I mean, the same period in the previous marketing year, 139. Barley, 17,000 tons, 1,000 tons. That's, 1,000 tons less. And 139 less than the previous year. I'm sorry, I just misnamed. So it is not the total, it is the difference. 139, 1,000 tons differences. Rye has not been exported at all this year. And corn is 29,000 tons less. This is just within this beginning of the marketing year, not within the even the full months period. So the prices. Let me give you the understanding in what marketing conditions Ukrainian farmers live right now. First is the price that was before war. These are the average prices that I considered succeeded collecting from internet, from the official statements in Ukraine and abroad. And you can see that before the war, sunflower, for example, was a little over 700. Now it is 2,100, and in worldwide, in Ukraine, it is 561. So this price was in Poland. This is the Poland price. Why is that so? Because majority of the sunflower is produced in Ukraine. And of course, the current situation doesn't allow to export a lot of sunflower, enough sunflower. That's why the price in the world is taking into consideration that Ukraine is that much significant in the supply of sunflower. The price is very high. Almost $1,500 is what Ukrainian farmers are losing right now. Corn, before the war, it was 300 per metric ton. Everything is per metric ton. 170 right now in Ukraine, 273 in the world. It seems to me the data is from Chicago area, but I'm not sure. It is the latest that I found on Google. $100 less. $200 less is barley. Half less, more than 50% less price for Ukrainian farmers to sell canola in Ukraine. Wheat is almost 40% less in Ukraine than abroad. And here we are talking about the not the feed wheat, but the higher quality wheat. Soybeans is $200 less price in Ukraine. So these are the numbers that result in the losses due to the port blockade. They are also influencing the survival of the bigger farmers, the survival of the smaller farmers, the economy, and a lot of things to go. And unfortunately, Russians understand that. That's why they're targeting agricultural industry secondary after the military industry. So the stocks at the end of the previous marketing year, were estimated about 25.9 million tons. That's including the commodities that are supposed to be used by Ukrainians. So we use about, it was stated at the beginning of the spring that we needed about 7 million metric tons of these commodities for the inside, for consumption in Ukraine. But they couldn't calculate how much of the population has left, which will result in lesser consumption inside. And at that point, they were saying that we had about 20 to 25 million metric tons for the export. So in total, a little bit around 30 million metric tons was in the spring, in the beginning of the spring. Right now, we have 26 million metric tons. That's the official data. It's going back and forth. But the main conclusion here is that we have too much still in Ukraine and the export is too slow still. Now, the next marketing year, even with the lesser yields, with the shift to the commodities that yield less, will result in almost 37 million metric tons. Optimistic forecast. By saying optimistic here, it is the opposite to the optimistic that would be last year. Optimistic means less. Pessimistic means more. So in the normal conditions, pessimistic is the success, would be the success for the farmers, but optimistic would be the poor yield. Now let me remind about the ports. This is important for you to remember how Ukraine was exporting the grain, because the next slides will bring some new information. So here is the numbers of the ports that were used to export agricultural commodities, and all the commodities. Here is all the commodities from Ukraine. The biggest one that was able to do 53.5 million tons over the year of all the commodities was the southern port. It is transliterated from Russian, that's why it's called Yuzhny here. It's over Odessa. The next is Mykolaiv. You remember that Mykolaiv, again, the transliteration says Nikolaev, but this is the same port, 29.8. The port located on the Dnieper River. Chornomorsk port, it is it used to be Ilyichovsk. Yes, this is they changed the name. Ilyichovsk changed to Chornomorsk. Then Odessa port is over here. You see those three ports are on the Black Sea. Mariupol port, we lost it long ago, unfortunately. Olvia port is not even stated here, and Berdyansk port is here. Then, of course, Kherson port, also located on the river. And the three ports that are left that are still functioning are the ports in Danube River. Now let's go to the next slide. What export options we still have? It hasn't changed much since the previous year, bi-weekly. However, it can change very quickly. So options are by train. The problems is the difference in the size of tracks, lack of the cars, and a lot of paperwork at the border. Of course, the Danube ports that are much smaller in capacity, as you saw, and by trucks. Again, a lot of lines and a lot of paperwork. Train and trucks exportation results in the loss of quality of commodities. So Ukrzaliznytsia, the Ukrainian railway, has doubled the export. They are working on the opportunity, on the possibility to improve the export and increase the capacities brought through the railway. compared to March, June, so they have doubled it. But still, it is a little less than 1 million compared to 6 million before the war. Ukazaliznytsia, being the main artery for exportation of grains, is a little bit less than 1 million. And of course, 15% less than over the same period last year. Grain exports, so 3 ports are used. 5 ports are in the uncontrolled territory, and 7 ports are blocked. This is the latest numbers. And these ports, these numbers you can see, they are in thousands of tons. So it is 0.1 million metric tons that was exported through Mykolaiv of the agricultural commodities. So Mykolaiv was the main agricultural port, but the second in all the cargo. After we have freed the Zmyny Island, which is located somewhere here approximately, the area over here has become safe enough and uncontrolled by Russians. Therefore, a lot of cargo ships and barges have come here. At the beginning, they were coming through this main river strait, but after the island opened, there is a shorter way here. It's called Bystre, or quick estuary of the new Black Sea waterway, and they have started to go through here. But still, 130 ships that were registered a couple of days ago standing in line here, that's way too much for the new river to let through. This is the example how they were waiting. They used to go from here, but when Zmyny Island, Snake Island, was freed, they started to go through here. But still, the actual river of Danube, which goes to the Baltic Sea, it has a limited capacity. All the ports in Europe are trying to increase its capacity for the reloading of Ukrainian grain, but the new harvest in Europe is coming, and the priority is going to be given to them, not to Ukrainian, of course, grain. Therefore, they need to work on improving and increasing the capacities. So Romania has restored the wider rail in order to deliver to the port of Galati from Ukraine. Again, small port, but this is collected by Crumbles, so to say. Also, the meeting that is going on today, the second day in Turkey, they say that they have made an agreement, the first agreement yesterday, but it needs to be approved by Putin. And more than 20 million tons of grain can finally go through the main ports of Ukraine. If, and here are the conditions. First of all, Turkey is going to be a mid person or mid country in this agreement. They will be responsible for providing the access to the neutral waters from Ukrainian ports. So not Russian ships, but Turkish ships will be first inspecting the incoming barges to Ukraine for the presence of the, so to say, weapons there, because Russia wanted to do that. And they will make sure that those international cargo ships, after having been loaded in Ukrainian ports, will successfully reach their neutral waters. Also, there is a lot to be done about the demining of the ports. So this is that commission and the negotiations, how they looked like yesterday. And of course, Turkey has negotiated 25% of discount, which results in about $100 discount on the wheat that they will be purchasing from Ukraine for their role of middleman. With all of that being very uncertain, Ukrainians looking for the ways to do Ukrainian farmers, as with a lot of allies, are looking for the ways to keep to store as much as possible of the grain inside Ukraine, and that is the only option because first of all, with that amounts of crops, it is difficult to find the temporary storages outside Ukraine. Secondly, those storages will greatly influence the market in that country. Here I'm speaking about Poland. Poland is reluctant to store temporarily all that grain because it will severely affect the prices in this country. So all the projects are looking at creating the temporary storages like this in Western Ukraine, Rivne, Volyn, and other oblasts. There is information, unofficial information, that there are a lot of foundations working on that with the government institutions. And even President Joe Biden has claimed that they will support creation of these storages within Ukraine. Here we talk about, on this slide, we see one of the options, which is considered according to the elevatories.com website, is calculated as the most effective per bushel storage and easy to install. It is still requiring a lot of area of land, a lot of acreage, but not that much and not that difficult to operate as the bags, the tunnels. I'm not speaking about the big bags, but the tunnels. So these warehouses, according to the standard that is able to be built in Ukraine, 13,000 metric tons of corn can be stored. We would need 770 units like that in order to store 10 million of tons. Only we are speaking about half of what we have, 10 million tons. It requires more than 400 hectares of land, and the cost of the storage will be about $15 per ton. 10 million tons will result in the budget of storage $150 million. Quite a substantial amount. Here are here is the second option, the tunnels, and they can compared to the previous ones, the temporary warehouses, which can last for 5 years. This is only 1 year time frame. The cost is 3 times higher, and they require 100 times bigger acreages to store this grain. Therefore, we again come to the fact that Russia is targeting the most vulnerable and the most important industry in Ukraine. And while they are doing the negotiations in Turkey and other countries and claiming that they do not block the ports and do not oppose the export of the grains, they are actually, meanwhile, targeting the infrastructural agricultural objects. This reminds very well the food wars that have been going on between, that have been caused by Russia in Ukraine in the history. One of that was the famine, the starvation in 1932-33, where in the face of winter, all the Ukrainian peasants, which produced food for themselves, were not able to buy anything, but they supplied themselves fully with food over the winter. All the food was taken from them. All the grains, all the commodities that they have stored for the winter was in a couple of days taken away from them. Therefore, we are all the officials are saying that food is one of the instruments that war is using in Ukraine. And it is very easy to understand how important that instrument is, taken into consideration that we can feed 600 million people by Ukrainian agricultural industry in ideal world. But before the war, we were able to feed 400 million people a year. with a population of only 36 to 40 million in Ukraine, 1/10, there is a huge population in the world depending on us. Of course, this increases the prices for food worldwide, which results in inability of food for the people in the countries that are developing. Here are the crops that Ukraine was producing that considered to be most important in Ukraine, and these are the places, the rank of Ukraine in producing these commodities worldwide. Now, according to our calculations here, we have the number of people that only due to the damages to their family farms in Ukraine will not be able to get food. That number is from 12 to 16 million people. Here how the calculation is going. We know that the family farms and small families in Ukraine, small farms in Ukraine, they produce around 30% of all crops and 40-45% of animal produce. This is Carlos. Thank you for the message. Heroям слава. With these numbers, and taking into consideration the observation that our team has made while traveling through the villages after the occupation in the northern part of Ukraine, that's the minimum, because northern part of Ukraine was occupied for only about a couple of weeks, whereas the southern and eastern part of Ukraine has been occupied already for over 150 days. Therefore, over almost 4 months. Therefore, damages there can be much higher than on every 10th farm. So with this calculation, we result in 12 to 16 million people depending only on the small farms. Those who have 1 to 2 cows, those who grow about a hectare of the commodities, borscht set commodities, those who have a couple of pigs, a couple of chicken, they are very substantial in the food supply, and they are enormous in the population of Ukraine, or especially rural population. So here we have this slide explaining why they're so important. If you take all the producers in Ukraine, the total acreage of Ukrainian land is 70 million acres, so up to 20%. Those are agricultural corporations operating this land. Private farmers come up to 50%, and the remaining are these small family farms. And this is what they produce. That all is the breakdown of this information can be found on our website, worldtorebuildruralukraine.org, if you are interested. And here we are coming to the actual project that we are undertaking right now. And with this project, I'm traveling through the United States of America to promote this problem and to speak to as many people as possible about this problem. And of course, it is about the donations, raising the donations to help rebuild these small family farms and rural civil objects. So we have the targeted aid coming towards those who suffered most from the Russian aggression. So far, we are talking only about the areas that have been freed up from Russian military, the northern part of Ukraine. In the future, and unfortunately, this project will last for years. In the future, we will be doing the same in the southern areas, and we are looking for partners to join this effort, because no one so far has developed this secondary aid program. Why I'm saying secondary aid? Because it's not about the military survival, it's about food survival. These people have survived the military aggression. Now they need to get back their lives back and their production back to secure their food supply. So we are targeting 4 focuses. First, their houses. Second, their production capacities, storage, warehouses, animal premises. and of course the agricultural machinery and the farm animals. This is what we are trying to recover, rebuild, and repurchase for those people who have suffered Russian aggression and cannot return to the normal lives themselves because they have no access to the funds like the loans and sell something from other locations. In order to be most transparent, our program has the board of ambassadors. Those are the reputable people worldwide who not only testify to support us, but they also influence our decisions on how the money is spent. And any company who joins the project can become an ambassador, can sign up the ambassador. So 2 important points in this program: no cash is given off, just the objects or the equipment units, and no upgrade. We are just replacing what they had. As a result, right now we are approving with our board of directors 3 potential aid recipients. Yes, of course, the recording will be available to you on the same page, waru.org/live. I'm sorry, I just answered the question. So, I'm sorry. So the first is the house that we are looking for to rebuild for Kokosha Allah. It was destroyed on March 28th. Here is the plan, how it, oops, could you please turn off the microphone? This is the plan of the house, and this is the approximate value of the reconstruction. Now we have the third, the slide might be, yeah, B. Farmer, 500 hectares. He's been very well prepared for the season, but Russians destroyed everything that he had, including the equipment and the commodities and inputs. So we are trying to help him with a number of things. This is the list of things, and we are spreading the word about his damages in Ukraine, first of all, because somebody can share the actual items. But number one item that we are trying to repurchase for him is the tractor, which is valued about $20,000. And the last is the third, but not the last, I wish it would be the last, is the family farm of Irina Shevchenko. She had this small barn with the kitchen and warehouse and pig barn, as well as chickens were there. All of it was destroyed with a missile attack about 8th of March, and only the dairy cows survived. They are outside right now. And she's producing the borscht set. This is the set of vegetables that is used for cooking Ukrainian traditional meal borscht, which is the cabbage soup or table beet soup. And she's operating 1 hectare of land in addition to the animals that she has. So how to help? And here I'm asking everyone who can help us, first of all, spread the word about it. Do not disconnect, because now we are going to talk with Vitaly and with Denise after I finish this these slides. So how to help? First of all, we are collecting the donations, and the donations are coming to the reputable NGO in the United States, LifeNets. Also, we are asking to pledge every agricultural producer to donate 1 penny from the future harvest per bushel. And of course, this is the latest option that we have developed. We are giving off our agricultural courses, which were collected by Travelite Agro during the years 2020-2022. And they are about the detailed production of 5 crops, fertilization, and micronutrients application. Let me show you the video I wanted to show you at the beginning. This is very short. So this is the commercial that we are going to be running through the internet, and we are looking for your help in spreading the word. I'm sorry, this is just the next video. Okay, so we are looking for the opportunity to speak and to present to as many people as possible, and you can see the options on the slide here. If you're thinking of anyone who could be interested in hearing the message that we have and supporting our program, and if you can spread this video through the farmers, I would be, and the whole Ukrainian population would be very grateful to you for that help. This is the most we can do, but without your help, we will not be able to succeed and to bring those lives of those people who suffered to what it has been before. So right now we have our guest here. Vitaly, are you there? Vitaly, ты тут?
Так, тут.
We have Vitaly to speak with us about the situation in the fields of Ukraine, and he is both the project coordinator with Travelite, but also he is the consultant for the agricultural production in Ukraine, and he can provide the good outlook on the situations in the actual fields. Тож, Віталій, якщо ми повернемося до наших питань, у нас було там декілька питань, які ми хотіли саме звернути увагу. Які зараз найбільші проблеми, з якими стикається фермер в Україні, середньостатистичний на територіях, які не окуповані? So first, let's ask the question, what are the main problems, the main challenges that the farmers are facing in unoccupied Ukraine?
Звичайно, проблема номер один – це закриті порти, тобто фермера не можуть продавати вирощену продукцію. І відповідно…
The problem number one is the ports that are closed and farmers cannot sell their produce for the reasonable price or cannot sell at all.
Верніше, вони можуть продавати, але не в таких кількостях і саме головне не по тій ціні. І відповідно це саме найбільше всіх бентежить. І проблема номер два – це проблеми із пальним. Ну зараз ця ситуація вже трошки покращується.
So, of course, they can sell, but limited amounts and for very low prices. The problem number two is the availability of fuel for the farmers, as well as the availability, as well as the price for it. It has improved a little bit, so the availability is there. However, the price is still too high. Okay, і...
Так.
Да. А стосовно таких питань, як природні фактори, наприклад, чи сприяє природа в тих регіонах дощем, чи, я не знаю, будь-якими для досягнення?
Цей рік досить такий складний по погоднім умовам, тому що весна хоч і була рання, але затяжна і досить посушлива. Але надивлячись на це, наприклад, фермери центральної і західної України, центру і заходу України, то мають досить нормальні врожаї.
I asked if the nature is supporting the farmers by providing the timely rainfall and good conditions for production. So Vitaly says that the central and northern Ukraine has been pretty successful in the precipitation. In southern Ukraine, it has always been a problem.
Для прикладу, врожайність озимої пшениці на Західній Україні десь в межах 5-7 тонн, ячмінь також біля 7 тонн, ріпак 3-4 тонни. Центральні...
The Western Ukraine is the most successful in rainfall, so the yields in this part of Ukraine for wheat is about 5 to 7 tons. Ячмінь, ще раз, будь ласка, який врожай ячменю?
6-7 десь так.
6-7 tons of barley. And яка була третя культура?
Ріпак. Озимий ріпак 3-4 тонни. 3,5-4.
Winter canola is 3 to 4 metric tons. Якщо ми порівняємо ці цифри з півднем, то наскільки вони б вищі?
А південь, наприклад, якщо ми беремо південь, схід України, то це озима пшениця, це десь 3,5-4.
If we talk about the least precipitated areas, which is south and eastern Ukraine, of course, the areas that are most occupied right now, they yield about 3.5 to 4 metric tons of wheat.
Ріпак 2-2,5 тонни.
Canola, winter canola, 2 to 2.5 metric tons of yield per hectare.
Ну і ячмінь 3-4, не більше.
And barley is 3 to 4 metric tons. So you see how significant is the difference in the yields between the areas. Як відносно майбутньої посівної озимих? Багато розмов зараз іде щодо того, що фермери, будучи в такій скруті достатньо довго, вони просто відмовляються сіяти озимі. I'm asking, what about the future winter crops planting season, because their work has been lasting so long that they cannot afford economically to plant winter crops. At least this is what they say. How true is that?
Ну, в цілому ще поки що якби фермери не визначили, що вони будуть робити. Вони поки що, скажімо так, планують в роздумах, що робити, і все ж таки надіються, що найближчим часом порти будуть відкриті.
So far, we cannot speak be quite certain about what the planting season will look like, because the farmers are still observing and trying to decide what to do. However, it can develop in this direction, as it is said.
Але в цілому можна виділити такі тренди, що все ж таки більшість фермерів, ну принаймні з тим, з ким я спілкуюсь, націлені збільшувати площі під озимою пшеницею, особливо озимим ріпаком.
So, however, my personal observations, Vitaly says, show that the farmers are considering increasing the acreage for the winter crops compared to the last year, especially for the wheat and на пшеницю і на ріпак озимий, так?
Озимий ріпак, так.
And canola,
але
winter canola.
будуть в наступному році планують збільшувати посіви під соняшником і суттєво скорочувати під кукурудзою.
But the next spring crops season, they plan to be increasing sunflower production, reducing the acreage on corn even more than this year. So more oil seeds might be coming. This is the observation.
Але знову ж таки, я так сподіваюся, і що як тільки зрушиться з мертвої точки відкриття портів і відповідно почнеться торгівля, більш-менш на довоєнному рівні, то все залишиться плюс-мінус на тому рівні, на якому вона є. Я маю на увазі структуру посівних площ.
На якому є зараз, на якому було до війни?
На якому було до війни.
However, the port blockade will very severely influence these decisions. If the ports are reopened within soon, the situation will start moving towards the way it was before the war in terms of the acreage under each of the crops. So we have two scenarios here. First, if the ports are closed, this is what the forecast can be. If the ports are open, we will gradually move back to the crops that have been there before the war. Як відносно насіння? Чи достатньо нам насіння соняшника, ріпаку? Пшеницю ми самі, в принципі, забезпечуємо, але соняшник, ріпак, наскільки я знаю, вони імпортуються. What about the seeds availability? If we're talking about the oil seeds, those are imported. Wheat, we have pretty much of our own varieties of wheat. So do we have enough of seeds for these winter crops and for the forecast for the next season?
Ну, в цілому проблем з насінням немає. Я думаю, що і не буде в наступному сезоні, тому що Україна має на сьогоднішній день більше 10 сучасних насіннєвих заводів, кожен з яких продуктивністю десь до 1 мільйона посівних, наприклад, мішків кукурудзи.
So we have about 10 modern seed factories in Ukraine, which can produce about 1 million of seeding units of corn. This is a very substantial volume to supply ourselves, our agricultural producers.
Ну
І
і
всі
крім того,
ці всі заводи, вони в неокупованих територіях.
переважна більшість ні.
Majority of them are in the non-occupied territories of Ukraine.
Вони всі на підконтрольних територіях, просто частина із них досить близько до зони бойових дій.
All of them are in the controlled by Ukraine territories. However, some of them are very close to the front line.
Тому на цих заводах є, скажімо так, перехідні залишки, які досить великий об'єм. Ну і крім того ж, сама ж в цьому сезоні площі під той самою озимою пшеницею і соняшником були суттєво скорочені, тому є ще перехідні залишки насіння як на складах дистриб'юторів, так і на цих зазначених насіннєвих заводах.
Also, this year, the spring crops were planted in a lesser amounts, the sunflower, and we are we have not used all the seeds for this season. Therefore, there will be the seeds remaining from the previous season for the next upcoming season, and that will supply the farmers. Як відносно сховищ, наскільки р'яно, не р'яно, я маю, наскільки відчутно брак потужностей для сховища зараз і очікування, які після збору цих озимих зараз?
Зараз переважна більшість фермерів, наприклад, якщо ми говоримо за пшеницю, ячмінь, то вони або їх кладуть в рукава, або розчищають під ці культури якісь свої складські приміщення, вплоть до того, що там, де в них зберігалася сільськогосподарська техніка, вони виганяють її на вулицю, і от ці приміщення використовують під склади.
So far, the farmers are considering and using these tunnels, and also the storages that they use for equipment, the flat storages, are re-established for the crops storages. So far, they are okay. My own observation, I talked to one of the farmers in the areas like Odessa and Ternopil. So the farmer in Odessa said that once the war started, he has started to build more and more storage capacities. The farmer in Ternopil region, they said that they were successful enough to sell majority of the crops before the war, so their storages are empty.
Тобто зернові культури намагаються зберігати самостійно, тому що продавати їх по низькій ціні ніхто не хоче. А кукурудзу, соняшник переважна більшість націлена зберігати вже безпосередньо на елеваторах або в себе, якщо є наявні сховища під ці культури.
Тобто
але в цілому проблем по зберіганню не відчувається.
So, of course, sunflower and corn is stored as long as possible, but no one is going to give off the grain, the grain crops, the small grains, for low price, so that it is sold, and they do not. So they are looking for the opportunities to store the commodities rather than sell them for lower price. And so far they have enough options. А як ти очікуєш взагалі під закінчення сезону ярих? Якщо у нас не відкриються порти, номер один, яка буде опція? І які будуть настрої фермерів по тому, що вони робитимуть? Наприклад, у нас ситуація залишається такою ж самою. Ми зараз збираємо озимі, у нас є можливість їх поки що зберігати. Але прийде сезон ярих культур цього року. Якщо не буде їх куди зберігати, що будуть фермери робити? При ситуації незмінні, ті самі. So what do you think if the situation does not change with the ports and the prices remain the same? The storages are filled up with these winter crops. What will happen by the end of the spring crop season? What will be farmers doing then?
Ну, звичайно, тут буде найбільшою проблемою соняшник, тому що соняшник це така культура, яка потребує особливого зберігання. То тут в першу чергу будуть думати, що з ним робити, куди його продати. А стосовно кукурудзи, то тут вплоть до того, що будуть лишати її на полі і будуть збирати тільки під продажу. Тому що кукурудзу можна збирати і протягом зимового періоду, якщо буде давати можливість погода. Якщо буде мороз, то це не проблема для збирання кукурудзи аж до, по суті, квітня місяця.
Under the current situation, if it doesn't change, the number one problematic crop to store will be sunflower because it is expensive and because it requires special conditions for storages. The corn would be the opposite. It can stand in the fields for months, even until April, if the winter is frosty, and farmers will tend to harvest it only closer to selling. So knowing that they will be able to sell, they will harvest only these amounts. Гаразд тоді, Віталій, поки що у мене питань немає. Has anyone any questions to Vitaly about the season? Because with me, I've asked all the questions that I had so far. If you have any, please proceed. Хіба що, Віталій, можливо, ти ще маєш щось додати, що ми не згадали? Так, в принципі. Угу.
То це вже обсудили.
Гаразд тоді. Окей, дякую тобі.
Можна сказати, що так, щоб було зрозуміло, в якій ситуації знаходяться фермери, з приводу доставки зерна в Європу. Наприклад, вартість доставки одного зерновозу коштує від 3 до 5 тисяч доларів.
Це звідки? Звідки? Це дуже важливо розуміти.
Наприклад, там в Польщу, чи в Прибалтику, чи в Болгарію, в Румунію.
Від 3 до 5 тисяч, так?
Так, за машину. А порахуйте, ціни ж на зерно в Європі ви ж демонстрували, там, грубо кажучи, 300-350 доларів тонна, тому помножте це на 25 і побачите, яка різниця лишається. Тому от більшість фермерів досить такими невеликими партіями відвантажує насіння, щоб хоча б щось, скажімо так, фінансувати свою діяльність, але більшу частину зерна всі притримують, якось складають, як можуть, на зберігання до кращих часів.
So we have mentioned, Vitaly is commenting upon the reasonability to export the produce right now by trucks. One truck, depending on where it is coming from Ukraine, is actually worth the transportation from $3,000 to $5,000. You have seen the prices. Multiply it by 25 tons that it can export, can haul. You will get the difference. Therefore, it is. And by the way, the prices are cheaper for the transportation in the EU border than here in Ukraine. That is what my farmers in Western Ukraine told me. I mean, my farmers, my good clients who I communicate regularly with, that the prices even to Western Ukraine is higher than behind the border in EU. So farmers are selling the commodities only in order to supply economically their business with some funds, but trying to hold down as much as possible before their ports are open. Гаразд, дякую, Віталій.
Ще одна фраза, для прикладу, на сході України з поля забирають зерно пшениці деякі трейдери по ціні від 30 до 50 доларів тонна. Тому що сюди вони додають ще свій заробіток, свої там транспортні затрати. І от виходить, що фермеру вони можуть запропонувати від 30 до 50 доларів тонна. І питання...
Це з пшениці ми говоримо?
Це ми говоримо за пшеницю, ячмінь в тому числі також. І питання, хто погодиться за таку ціну продати врожай, собівартість якого набагато вища.
For you to understand the eastern oblasts or the eastern regions of Ukraine, they are selling, and let me show you once again the prices for you to understand how much lower those are in eastern field oblasts from the field than in central, than the ones that I mentioned. So, скільки ти казав? $30-50 за пшеницю, да?
Да, від 30 до 50 доларів за тонну пропонують.
So the price is in the fields for the traders to buy from the farmers in the east for wheat and for barley from $30 to $50, 30 to 50. So barley here is 173, but in Europe it is 337, 10 times less. So 10 times cheaper in the fields in eastern Ukraine than in Europe.
Тому ситуація досить непроста, але наші фермери всі налаштовані досить позитивно і сподіваються, що порти все ж таки найближчим часом відкриються і вони будуть далі працювати на землі, як і працювали до війни.
So as you can see, the situation is very difficult. However, the farmers do not give up and they plan to return to normal farming style as they had before the war. Гаразд, дякую дуже, Віталій, і успіхів тобі в полях, взагалі всім нашим успіхів, саме головне це мирного неба, бо я так зрозумів, зараз воно саме найнебезпечніше. Так, по землі ми стоїмо міцно. Okay, thank you very much, Vitaly. Peaceful sky to you and to everyone, because as we understand recently, the sky brings the most danger for us. So now we are going to move to our new part of this presentation of this bi-weekly, where we are going to talk about the detailed productions of crops. And today we are going to talk, Denise is going to present the presentation, which was prepared by our team, by Denise, by Vitaly, who just was interviewed, and Irina, who was translating the presentation on sunflower production, our main crop in Ukraine, how Ukrainian farmers produce sunflower, why is it important in economy, and how significant are the volumes of sunflower in both in economy and in the fields. So Denise, hello, thank you for joining. Let me grant you a co-host right now. Oh no, you are co-hosted, so you can start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much for passing the word. Hello everyone, I'm happy to see all of you. And before going to detailed presentation on sunflowers in Ukraine, I just want to add some comments on previous discussion about the prices. Just to give you a quick explanation of current situation. I'm a farmer too. I operate 3,000 acres, and now I am offered just only $2.2 per bushel of corn, as opposed to the price at the Chicago Board of Trade, I think 6.9, something like that. So as Vitaly mentioned, the difference between 2.2 and 6.4 is the margin of a trader, but the vast portion of it accounts just only for logistic side. And this is really a nightmare, I should say. Going forward, I would tell you that probably I'm not going to harvest corn this year at all, because if this price prevails at the time of harvest and the blockade of ports is not solved in any way, then it doesn't make sense to harvest it at all, because at harvesting I will have to go to haul it to drying facility, then take care of hauling to let's say EU border. And if we calculate all the costs related to harvesting, storage, and drying, then I will incur additional loss per hectare, which is something like $150 to $200 per hectare. The most important part here is that the grain removal of fertilizer equivalent is also very high this year. You all know that fertilizers are extremely expensive, and most of the farmers don't account for this part of the equation, but I think that we should take into account that, let's say, 8 tons of corn per hectare removes fertilizer value at the total amount of approximately $400 per hectare. So if we take it into account, then it makes sense just to leave it standing in the field, just to disc it in and not to remove from the field. Okay, but nevertheless,
Yeah, very good analysis. By the way, we haven't taken into account these fertilizers inputs economy-wise. And in addition to that, I want to add only that a huge amount of millions of people in the world are actually expecting and praying for that corn to be delivered to them. Whereas in Ukraine, it is going to be disked, not for the reason that the farmers want to get rid of this commodity, but because they have no choice. Hopefully, we will win soon with the help of allies, and we will bring the what's right back to the world. Okay, please, Denis, thank you. Proceed.
okay. Then now please confirm if you can see the full screen of the presentation.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, nice. So today we're going to talk about sunflower production in Ukraine. The first, I want to start with very tricky points and ask you a question. Probably you've heard that Ukrainian farmers say that the corn is considered to be the queen of the field in Ukraine. So if the corn is the queen, then there should be a king of the field, respectively. So just try to guess what the king of the field can be. And surely this is a sunflower. Why sunflower? Because it is grown on very large acreages in Ukraine. Also, it produces one of the highest operating margins over many years. And this is the reason why we should focus on this crop and to try to understand what the prospect we have for this year. Okay, so there are 6 key sun-producing regions in the world: Ukraine, Russia, European Union, Argentina, China, and Turkey. In Ukraine, sunflowers planted area is 7.1 million hectares, and in fact, our country is ranking second largest in terms of acreage. By acreage itself, Ukraine sunflowers account for 25% of the global acreage. So this is really important crop for Ukraine, and not just only for Ukraine, but for the world. Ukraine produces 17.5 million tons, or 31% of the total production, being the largest producer in the world. And just I want to emphasize that despite Ukraine ranks second in terms of acreage after Russia, you can see here the difference. But in terms of production, we outperform Russia by acreage because of high yield. Sunflower acreages are mostly concentrated in central, eastern, and central part of Ukraine. However, due to climate changes, the area of sunflower planting moves further to the northwest. My farm is located over there, just 30 miles to the south from Rivne. And I can tell you that 7 years ago, there were no farmers raising sunflower in my region. And I was actually one of the first to start. The reason for that was because the climate was quite cold for sunflowers. Crop heat units were not sufficient to produce a decent yield. But just in the last 5 years, the situation changed dramatically. And now in my region, approximately 15 to 20 or even more percent of total acreage is devoted to sunflowers. But here on this map, what is really important to mention is that the key sunflower producing regions are now either partially occupied by Russians or heavily attacked by Russian missiles and army. Okay, so this slide has already been discussed by Roman. In fact, we have 22% of our territory under Russian occupation, and another very big portion of fields are under constant shelling by Russian invader. Because of the war, this year Ukrainian farmers planted 25% less than the previous year. We expect this year the sharp decline in sunflower production. There are different estimates, but we believe that it will be probably something like 9.5 million tons, which is 46% down versus the previous year. The yield is also expected to fall because farmers were unable to spend enough on fertility side. A lot of farmers had just to skip some important passes across the field because they were not able to do that under constant attacks from Russians. If we look into 30 years back, we could see that over the last 30 years, the yield improved by 46% where we take 1990, because this is a year when Ukraine became independent, in fact, in 1991. What is interesting here, you can mention that the most significant yield improvement is happening in northwestern region. That's what I already told. You can see that in southeastern part, the yield improved a little bit. In some areas even dropped because of the severe droughts, which are happening very often there. But in northwestern part of the country, yield improvement was the most significant. This is a region where my farm is located. I think that one of the key drivers for yield improvement was the use of better technology and access to first-class genetics. Sunflower seed output grew by 5 times from the time when Ukraine got independence and to the days before the war started. I have to mention that sunflowers is the most profitable crop in southeastern part of Ukraine. This is a crop which can pump the water by its prolific root system, which goes very deep, and that's why sunflowers can withstand very extended periods of drought. And this is something that really helps to survive in southeastern part of Ukraine. Almost 100% of sunflower seeds are processed domestically. You can see that, for example, if we take 21-22 marketing year, out of 16.5 million tons, domestic consumption was nearly 99%, out of which 99% were domestically processed. So nowadays, Ukraine does not export sunflower seeds. It only exports sunflower oil and byproducts, which are generated in the process of sunflower crushing. 2021 was the record-setting year in terms of sunflower seeds price. The price almost doubled from 400 to $750 per metric ton. It was before the war. There were actually two waves of price hikes. So the first happened in 2021. Then there was a small drop by the end of 2021, and then it rose again just before the war started. What is interesting here is that before the war, sunflower seeds were priced even higher than soybeans at around 700 per metric ton. You can see the difference over there, let's say 700 here, and soybeans were priced even less, which is not, I would say, usual or normal, because the cost of raising sunflowers is somewhat less than soybeans, and the yield potential for sunflower in Ukraine is higher than for soybeans. Soybeans are, as you know, soybeans are really dependent on water, on rainfall, as opposed to sunflower, which can withstand very few rains over the growing season. So correspondingly, sunflower oil reached $1,400 per metric ton before the war. Basically, you can see how it was moving across the year. It reached the highest $1,428 per metric ton. That's obvious that sunflower seeds just follow the dynamics of oil at the global market, because they're heavily tied to actually the final product, which is sold globally. The key driver of that price hike was a high demand on global vegetable oil market, which was growing since the beginning of 2020. I have to mention here that in 2020-21, China and India were two key consumers of sunflower oil globally, and you probably remember China being really aggressive at world markets, buying and stockpiling very large stocks. And at the time when it was happening, personally, I couldn't really understand what is happening and why China is accumulating such huge reserves. And I think that the most of analysts globally also were looking for the answers for this phenomena. But now, after Russians started the war against Ukraine, we can probably understand why they were doing this. I'm more than convinced that they were aware of the Putin's plans, and that was the key reason why they were really aggressive at the world markets. Quality standard for sunflower seeds in Ukraine consists of many parameters, but the most important one is moisture content that shouldn't be more than 8%. Oil content varies from 42 to 50%, but the most common market practice is to require at least 48 to 49%. In case with lake hybrids, the content of lake acid should be at least 60, but again, the market requires at least 84. So, where do we sell sunflower oil? In overall, almost 7 million tons are exported. The key markets for Ukrainian sunflower oil are, first of all, India, 28%, 18% China. So both these countries combined, they consume almost half of Ukrainian sunflower oil exports. These countries are two key market players globally. As you can see, the export sales to EU are not really substantial. We sell approximately 10% to Netherlands and 6% to Spain. If we look into top 12 sunflower producers, oh, sorry, I have switched to another slide. So you can see that there is a number of domestic businesses like Kernel, MHP, as well as multinationals like Bunge, ADM, Delta Wilmar. So as you see, we have quite diversified market structure with no clear monopoly of any market player. Of course, Kernel is number one with market share of 23.1%. By the way, Kernel itself is one of the largest, if not the largest, actually, agri holdings in Ukraine. They have approximately 1.5 million acres in operation, and they heavily invested into crushing facilities and capacities across Ukraine. Okay, so sunflower seed processing in Ukraine is heavily localized. Nearly all sunflower seeds harvested by local farmers are processed domestically. While combined profitability of farmers, producers of seeds and crushers is determined by global prices, the exact split of earnings between farmers and crushers depends on the supply of seeds and the demand for seeds. At the left side of the slide, you can see the data from financial statements of Kernel for 2021. And what is interesting here, as you can see, crushing capacity increased from 12 to 19.3 million tons. So it's a substantial move over the last 7 years. Last year summer was very dry, and sunflower seeds processing fell to 13.6 million tons due to a shortage of supply. And this led crushing margin to fall from $100 per metric ton to 42. And of course, that squeezed crushing margin very seriously, because Big plants, big crushing facilities, so they were chasing for supply of sunflower seeds, and they were offering best possible prices, even at the cost of its own profitability. So last year, sunflower was the most profitable crop in Ukraine. Okay, let's move further. So, as we already learned, the overall installed crushing capacity is 19.3 million tons. And the largest crushers are Kernel, with a market share of 19%, multinationals with 20% market share, 26% goes to local big crushers, and 30% accounts to local small crushing facility. The obvious conclusion we come for is that market is saturated. It doesn't need new or additional crushing capacities. It is well diversified and very competitive, with no any signs of monopoly on the market. This is one, basically, this is one of the explanations why sunflower remains one of the most profitable crops in Ukraine. Just because the competition for the supply of sunflower seeds is high, and basically Ukrainian farmer, at least before the war, he got the global price, less crushing margin by processor, and of course the profit margin, which was not really high. I mean, for the trader, for the processor. Also, it's worth to mention that this market is not heavily regulated by the government. This slide is quite interesting because it explains how sunflower oil is being distributed via two key channels. The majority of sunflower oil is being sold in bulk to the following destinations, like, as we already discussed, China, India, Iraq, Europe. But the segment of bottled sunflower oil is structured somehow in an absolutely different manner. You can see that 42% of bottled sunflower is sold domestically in Ukraine. Then 18% goes to Europe and 16% to Middle East. This slide explains in very simple terms how crushing process looks like. So if we take 1 metric ton of sunflower seeds, the first process is the hulling and filtering. As a result of that, approximately 16% of the total mass being pulled away as a husk. At the end, we have the hulled kernel. Then it goes to pressing and extracting facilities. And at the end of this process, we get approximately 42% of crude sunflower oil. The part of that is being sold in bulk, and the part goes to bottling facility, and then it's sold to supermarkets. And also we get a byproduct, which is called sunflower meal, approximately 39% of the total mass. Husk is being used for burning and producing electricity, or just selling to the open market. By the way, the husk has become a very popular source of energy to supply to grain drying facilities over the last couple of years. This is the way how we can actually save on Russian gas, and this is a way how to to cut the total consumption of Russian gas globally. This is how the price on domestic market was changing over the last 8 years. Basically, domestic prices were relatively stable since 2016, but rose twofold in 2021. The reason for that is very simple, because the global markets hiked in price, and basically the domestic price also is tied to the global market. It's not regulated by the government somehow. Despite some political groups and politicians, they try to influence on that and try to impose some restrictions, some price caps, but for the time being, until up to this moment, the industry was powerful enough to defend itself from any attempts somehow to regulate it. Okay, so as we already discussed, since Ukraine gained independence in 1991, sunflower oil production grew by 5 times, while the exports grew by 54 times. As I mentioned, there were 2 key reasons for that. First, growing market demand. Secondly, in 1999, Ukrainian government introduced a 23% duty on the export of sunflower seed. This is only regulation that was introduced at this market, and I should say that it played really beneficial role, because from logistical standpoint, it became unprofitable to export sunflower seeds. You know that they are light in weight, and at the time, crushing margin was up to $200 per metric ton, and it generated a good return on investment from crushing capacities. And since then, crushing capacities have grown 9 times. The other side of this story is that in 2021, when there was a shortage in supply of sunflower seeds because of the arid summer, just only 60% of those capacities were loaded with sunflower seeds. And that was the reason why crushing margin fell such severely. And of course, we have to mention 2 byproducts. This is sunflower cake and sunflower meal, which are also really important, and Ukraine also exports a lot of them abroad. Okay, so just to make a short summary, Ukraine produces 2 times more than countries from European Union produce. You can see less than 4 million metric tons, and Ukraine produces almost 7.6. And I think that this year we could easily reach 8 million tons if not the war that Russia started against Ukraine. This is why Ukrainian fields and Ukrainian sunflower production is really important. I can't really explain why the price is falling now. It should be pretty obvious and clear that Ukraine will definitely undersupply the very big portion of sunflower crop this year. But at the same time, global markets somehow I think, do not respond to this situation and don't really understand that would be really a big problem this year. Even bigger problem than in case with wheat or corn. Okay, so global sales of agrichemical products intended for protection of sunflower crop is estimated at $1 billion globally. Last year, market has grown by 10%. Ukraine accounts for 22% market share, while the country produces 33% of sunflower seeds. What is interesting, Russia consumes 25% of agrochemicals, but it produces only 27. So you can see the difference. Ukraine produces 33 and consumes 22% of total agrochemicals, and Russia just vice versa. I don't want to somehow to make any to try to explain the situation, but the only obvious thing which I can tell is that from technological standpoint, Ukraine produces really decent crop, and we are really cost effective in terms of using farm inputs. As you can notice, the fungicides segment of the market is outperforming the average for agrochemicals. I think that the explanation here is quite straightforward. A high yield potential means more pathogen pressure and more fungicide resistance. So, if we look into regional breakdown by consumption of agrochemical products, you can see that Ukraine is a really important market for any chemical company in the world. This is the reason why we have all the players sitting in Ukraine, like Bayer, BASF, Syngenta, and Adama, and many other big names. And all of them are selling good products and active ingredients, which are being sold abroad as well. You can mention that on average, fungicides account for 9.4% of global sales. However, the share of fungicides in Ukraine is twice bigger than global average. And which is interesting, Russia spends just about zero on fungicides. It leads me to the thought that probably because they follow more extensive model of farming, they have huge acreages, but really low output of that. And Ukraine is ranking second in terms of yield globally after China. And that's why this is the reason we have to use more budget on fungicides side, just to protect the yield potential. What is interesting here that USA also spends just about zero. I'm not sure how correct those numbers are, but as I see, it comes from reputable source, so we have just to believe in these numbers. Okay, so what about seed market for sunflowers? As we can see, global seed market grew by 35% over the last decade. This is really a substantial move. However, sunflowers almost doubled from 653 to 1,146 million dollars. And I can assume that Ukrainian portion of global demand is really pushing this number every year. Now let's talk about some Ukrainian specific issues when growing sunflowers. One of such problems is Orobench or broom rape. This is a small parasitic herbaceous plant which is growing right from the roots of sunflower. The first recognized strain was detected at the end of 19th century. It's called race A, and it took 43 years for the next race to develop. And you can see that over the course of 20th century, the new race was developing in every 40-30 years. However, over the last 30 years, the time gap between the races became contracting, and now we understand that the next race is about to come very soon, because the last new race became obvious in 2004, both races G and H. Here is a map of the areas which are heavily affected by broom rape. So as you can see, broom rape is mostly spread in southeastern regions and central part of Ukraine. One of explanations is that those areas are heavily dominated by sunflower and crop rotations, and definitely if sunflower is planted after sunflower or the year after it was planted the year before, then definitely you're gonna face this challenge in the future. By the time being, we do not have such issues here in northwestern part of Ukraine. However, some farms are pushing sunflower acreages very hard, and in some farms, sunflowers are already planted on 30% of total acreage, and it means that sunflower is coming back to the same field in 2 or 3 years, and definitely we will have the same issue, let's say, in 5 to 10 years. Total sales of sunflower seeds are for a total amount of $245 million US. And you can see that in 2021, almost 2 million bags were sold. And Orobench issue explains why imidazolinon-resistant varieties account for 28% of the total hybrids sold in Ukraine. However, still classic varieties, which are not herbicide resistant, account for more than 1/3. Sulfonyl urea resistant hybrids account for 26%, and this market share is constantly growing. And also there is a small portion for high oleic hybrids, which is 11%. This portion varies from year to year because the market is really unstable. There are some years when, let's say, the price premium for oleic hybrid is $50 to $100 per metric ton. But there are some years when actually high oleic hybrids are priced the same, as classic or sulfonylurea resistant. Okay, so the most popular brands for sunflower hybrids in Ukraine are Syngenta, and most of Syngenta hybrids are being sold in central and western Ukraine. Pioneer, which is very popular at the south and central part of Ukraine, and Limagrain, which is mostly sold in southeastern part of Ukraine. The total number of hybrids is very large, 934. So Ukrainian farmer has a good choice or a good range to choose from. Any hybrid he wants. Basically, the next 3 slides describe the most popular hybrids in Ukraine. I don't think that it makes sense to discuss them in detail. I think that this presentation will be available for those who want to learn more. So I will just skip, but you can see that there is a great choice of big names here. Syngenta, Limagrain, Pioneer, any brand you want, any type of herbicide resistance. Just to name a few, we have, for example, classic hybrids, which require the application of pre-emergence herbicide only. And then we have so-called express hybrids, which are sulfonylurea resistant. Then we have classic high oleic hybrids, which are not herbicide resistant, and some varieties which are herbicide resistant too. Also, we have so-called clear field hybrids. It means they are imidazoline non-resistant varieties, and also clear field plus. In terms of planting equipment, there is also a big choice. We use some European big names like Waderstadt, Forstmaestro, Kinze, which is a great American producer. Maschio Gaspardo produced in Italy. Precision planting equipment is very popular in Ukraine. Basically, I have a planter which is equipped with precision planting vacuum meters, and various other attachments which produce really good results. Also, we use John Deere planters, Kuhn Maxima, which is French brand, Great Plains, which is American again, Amazone, which is German, and Lemken, also German, Querneland, Metermac. So a very wide range of planting equipment is available for Ukrainian farmers. And finally, a couple of words about farming practices when raising sunflowers. Normally, sunflowers are planted after winter wheat and corn. The corn is considered one of the best previous crops because normally we get very clean field after the corn. We are able to use a good chemistry when raising corn, like dicamba 2.4-D, and it allows to eradicate perennials and broadleaf perennial weeds. So this is really good previous crop. Normally, we try to keep sunflowers within 20 to 30% in crop rotation, because otherwise it becomes really dangerous. First of all, we already mentioned broom rape issue in Ukraine. but the second one is also very important. That's if you tend to plant sunflower after sunflower, then you will definitely face very harsh pressure from diseases. Phomopsis, Phomosis, and many others, botrytis especially, and definitely you will have to spend additional budget on fungicides, and even if you do so, it doesn't guarantee that you will be able to keep pathogens under control. Actually, the best SDHI fungicides which are available in Ukraine, they're able to keep up to 60% efficiency rate. Planting time usually starts in early mid-April from in the southeastern part of Ukraine and continues up to mid-May in north and western part. The seeding rate for planting population is about 20,000 plants per acre. In terms of herbicides technologies, I already mentioned that approximately 40 to 50% accounts for classic. It means that we use pre-emergence herbicide and then post-emergence in some cases. 25% accounts for Clearfield, and mostly Clearfield hybrids are being sown in southern and eastern part of Ukraine because of room rape again, because imidazoline herbicide can keep spore bench under control. And also the growing portion of so-called express ready hybrids. These are hybrids which are able to withstand sulfonyl urea herbicides. I can tell you that at my farm, I plant 100% of express resistant hybrids. It doesn't mean that I don't have to apply pre-emergence herbicides. I still do it, and it gives me from 2 to 3 weeks of herbicide control. Then I have weeds which just only start to emerge, and then I can use express herbicide to kill approximately 70 to 80% of broadleaves. And then I also have to make another separate pass with clethodim, which is a herbicide used to combat grasses. In terms of fertilizer or fertility program, it really depends on the region, on yield potential, on natural fertility in the soil. But here you have some ranges which are very broad, as you can mention, from 10 to 100 kilograms of actual nitrogen per hectare. There are some farmers who still believe that sunflowers doesn't consume a lot of, doesn't uptake a lot of nitrogen, which is not true, of course. But the reason they apply just only very small amounts of nitrogen is because of lack of moisture, and it explains. And in some regions of Ukraine, for example, in Mykolaiv and Zaporizhia, the yield potential is limited just only to 1 metric ton per hectare. And definitely at such levels, you don't require a lot of nitrogen. Phosphorus is one of the yield limiting factors, especially in the southern part of Ukraine, but it's not the case in northwestern part. In my area, for example, I have the severe shortage of potassium. However, here we have explanation that it's not almost not used, but it's almost not used in central and eastern part of Ukraine. But in northwestern part, we have to fertilize, to apply a lot of potassium just to keep the yield at decent level. I will just give you a brief example of my farm. I have to apply at least 150 to 200 kilograms of potash to keep up the yield at the level of 3.5 to 4 tons per hectare. As to fungicide treatments, we normally use at least one pass. In my area, farmers normally make a second pass at the flowering. Again, it all depends on precipitation. And normally the harvesting starts at the end of August and lasts until beginning of October. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. If you have questions, please, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Denis, for the presentation, and I'm sure that there will be more discussions later in terms of both email communications and direct communications with the people once we keep spreading the word about these events. This is for everyone to remind, this is the second time we are trying to spread the word about how the farmers in Ukraine are producing our top crops in the conditions that are that had been before the war and right now during the war. And if you have any ideas how to popularize our event bi-weekly and how to spread the word about what we are doing, we will be grateful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them to our contact information that you can see. You probably have received this link for today's event, and there is contact information. For all the rest, I would like to once again remind it is here. Just a second. Other than that, we will. Okay, the contact information is this is it. Other than that, see you in 2 weeks. Thank you for presence and thank you for support to Ukraine. Also, thank you to all our team, Denis, Vitaly, Irina, Olga, Andrei, Yulia, Olga, for everyone for supporting and making it possible to happen. Enjoy the weekend. See you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.